quiero presentarles a nuestro primer orador. Es Thomas Friedman. Thomas Friedman, creo que muchos de ustedes deben haber conocido sus libros. Es un gran periodista, es periodista del New York Times, tiene una columna desde hace muchísimos años allí y ha escrito decenas de libros. Tiene una preocupación trascendental por los asuntos extranjeros, por el medio ambiente, por la economía internacional y fundamentalmente por la diversidad y el cuidado de la madre tierra. Entre los libros que escribió, quiero destacar De Beirut a Jerusalén, The Lexus and the Olive Tree, el Lexus y el árbol de olivo, La tierra es plana, y su última publicación, que es Thank you for being late. Gracias por llegar tarde. Así que les pido un aplauso para escuchar a Thomas Friedman.
Thank you very much for that kind introduction. Great to be here at Centro Fox and at CITEK. I'm going to get right down to business. I wish I could speak Spanish. I can't, but I hope the translator is on top of it. I'm going to talk to you this morning about my latest book, Thank You for Being Late, an optimist's guide to thriving in the age of accelerations. First question I always get from people when they hear the title of the book, Thank You for Being Late, is where from comes this title? And it actually comes from meeting people for breakfast in Washington, D.C., where I live. I don't like to waste breakfast by eating alone, so I often have business breakfast. And every once in a while, someone comes 15, 20 minutes late. And they say, Tom, I'm really sorry. It was the weather, the traffic, the subway, the dog ate my homework. 3 years ago, this happened with a friend of mine, an energy entrepreneur, Peter Corcel. He came 15 minutes late, said, Tom, I'm really sorry. It was the weather, the traffic, the subway, the dog ate my homework. And I spontaneously said to him, actually, Peter, thank you for being late. Because you were late, I've been eavesdropping on their conversation. Fascinating. I've been people watching the lobby. Fantastic. And best of all, I just connected two ideas I've been struggling with for a month. So thank you for being late. Well, people started to get into it. They'd say, well, you're welcome. Because they understood I was giving them permission to pause, slow down, to reflect. In fact, my favorite quote from the front of the book is from my friend Dov Seidman, who says, when you press the pause button on a computer, it stops. But when you press the pause button on a human, it starts. That's when it starts to reflect, rethink, reimagine. And boy, don't we need to be doing a lot of that right now. Now, this book was actually triggered when I paused and engaged with someone I wouldn't normally engage with. I live actually in Bethesda, Maryland, a suburb of Washington, D.C. And I take the subway to work about once a week. And for me, that means driving my car to the Bethesda subway station. I take the red line to Washington, D.C., where my office is, near the White House, and I spend the day there. So on this occasion, I parked in the public parking garage where I always park, took the red line in, went to my office, spent the day, took the red line back, got my car, drove to the cashier's booth, handed my ticket to the cashier. He looked at it and looked at me and said, "I know who you are." I said, "Great." He said, "I read your column." I said, "Great. Parking guy reads my column." He said, "I don't always agree." I thought, get me out of here. But I said, "No, that's good. It means you have to check every time." And I drove off thinking, the parking guy reads my column. It's good. A week later, I took my weekly trip on the subway into DC, red line, office, work, red line back, parking garage, car, cashier's booth, timestamp ticket, same guys there. This time he says, "Mr. Friedman, I have my own blog. Would you read my blog?" I thought, oh my God, the parking guy is now my competitor. What just happened? So I said, well, write it down for me and I'll check. So he wrote on a piece of paper, odanambi.com. I went home, called it up on my computer. Turns out he's Ethiopian, writes about Ethiopian politics, real democracy advocate from the Oromo people. I thought about him for a couple days. I told my wife, and finally I concluded that this was a sign from God that I should pause and engage this guy. But I didn't have his email. So the only way I could do it was park in the parking garage every day, which I did for 4 days. We finally overlapped early one morning. I know his name now, Ayile Boji. I said, Ayile, give me your email. I want to send you an email. And that night we began an email exchange in which I basically said, I have a proposition for you. I will teach you how to write a column in the New York Times if you will tell me your life story. And he said, basically, I see you're proposing a deal. I like this deal. So we agreed to meet 2 weeks later at Pete's Coffee House in Bethesda. Presented him with a 6-page memo on how to write a column in the New York Times, and he told me his life story. Ethiopian economics grad from Haile Selassie University, was a democracy advocate, got thrown out of the country. We welcomed him in America as a political exile. He started blogging on Ethiopian websites there, but they were too slow. And so he decided to start his own blog, and now Mr. Friedman, I feel empowered. His Google metrics say he's read in 30 different countries. My parking garage attendant. And it's a wonderful story about how anyone today can participate in the global conversation. Well, I then explained to him how to write a column in the New York Times. I explained to him that a news story is meant to inform. I could write a news story about President Fox's gathering today, and he would tell me whether I informed better or worse. But a column is meant to provoke. It's meant to produce a reaction. I'm either in the heating business or the lighting business. That's what I do. I either do a heating or a lighting. They're stoking up an emotion in you, or I'm illuminating something for you. And if I do it right, I produce both heat and light. But in order to do that, I explained, you have to combine 3 chemicals to write a column. First is, what is your value set? What are the set of values you're pushing in the world? Are you a communist, a capitalist, a liberal, a conservative, a neocon, a neoliberal, a libertarian, a Marxist, a Keynesian? What are the values you're pushing? Second, how do you think the machine works? How do you think the machine works? The machine is my shorthand for what are the biggest forces shaping more things in more places, in more ways, on more days. As a columnist, I'm always carrying around in my head a working hypothesis of how the big gears and pulleys of the world work. Why? Because I'm trying to take my values and push the machine in their direction. And if I don't know how the machine works, I either won't push it or I'll push it in the wrong direction. Lastly, what have you learned about people and culture? because there's no column without people, and there are no people without culture. How does the machine affect different people and culture, and how do they come back and affect the machine? Mix those three together, stir them up, let them rise, and bake for 45 minutes, and if you do it right, you'll produce a column that produces heat and light. Well, the more I explained this to Ayile, the more I started to ask myself, well, if that's what a column's about, what's your value set? Those of you who read me know is that I'm not quite a liberal, I'm certainly not a conservative. That's because my values actually come from the small town in Minnesota where I grew up in the 50s, 60s, and 70s at a time and place where politics worked. How do I think the machine works today? And what have I learned about people and culture? And that is the book I wrote. So what I want to focus on with the rest of this morning is how I think the machine works today. What are the biggest forces impacting you here in Mexico, me in America, our friends in Europe, the Middle East, Africa, and Asia? What are the biggest forces and how they are not just changing your world, but reshaping your world? Your world is not just changing, it's being reshaped. And 5 realms are being reshaped in particular: the workplace, politics, geopolitics, ethics, and community. So let me first talk about how I think the machine works today, and then we'll talk about how it's reshaping these different realms. I think what is shaping more things in more places, in more days and more ways, is that we are in the middle of 3 non-linear accelerations all at the same time, with the 3 largest forces on the planet, which I call Mother Nature, the market, and Moore's Law. Mother Nature for me is climate change, biodiversity loss, and population growth. If you put those on a graph today, they look like a hockey stick. That's America's Glacier National Park in 1913. That's America's Glacier National Park in 2012. That's Lake Chad in 1963 in Central Africa. That's Lake Chad today. That's global average temperature, that hockey stick. That's the number of extreme weather incidents since 1988, another hockey stick. That's world population growth, another hockey stick. All the key metrics of Mother Nature are in acceleration: population, climate, and biodiversity loss. The market for me is globalization, but not your grandfather's globalization. That was containers on ships and planes. That's actually been flat lately. The globalization that's accelerating like a hockey stick today is digital globalization. The way everything is being digitized and globalized, whether by Facebook or Amazon or PayPal or the cloud. If you put digital globalization on a graph, it looks like a hockey stick. Looks like this. That's total data consumed per month. It looks like this. Mobile cellular subscriptions in the United States. And it looks like that. That's the third acceleration, Moore's Law. Moore's Law is the acceleration in technology. Moore's Law was coined in 1965 by Gordon Moore, the co-founder of Intel. And what did he predict in 1965? He predicted that the speed and power of microchips would double every 24 months. And for the last 52 years, Moore's Law has delivered. For 52 years, once a year, someone has written, Moore's Law is over, Moore's Law is running out, and for 52 years, what they all have in common is they were all wrong. The speed and power of microchips just keeps doubling. This computer that's running this PowerPoint It's operating on an Intel 14 nanometer chip. You can't even see it with your eye. It has on it 37.5 million transistors per square millimeter. At the end of this year, in a few months, Intel will begin shipping its 10 nanometer chip. It has 100 million transistors per square millimeter. If you think the world is fast today, just wait till the end of the year. The difference between a 14 nanometer chip and a 10 nanometer chip is a self-driving car that needs the whole trunk of the car to take its brains, and a self-driving car that will need a little box under the front seat to take its brains. A few years ago, Intel tried to explain to people the power of Moore's Law, because it's very hard to grasp. So they took a 1971 Volkswagen Beetle, and they said, what if this Volkswagen Beetle had improved at the same rate of Moore's Law since 1971? And Intel's engineers estimated that if that Beetle had improved at the same rate of Moore's Law, today it would go 300,000 miles an hour, it would get 2 million miles per gallon, and it would cost 4 cents. You'd be able to drive it your entire life on 1 tank of gas. That is the power of the technological exponential driving our lives. Now, I think what's happened basically is all three of these exponentials are interacting with each other. More Moore's Law drives more globalization, digital globalization. More globalization drives more climate change and solutions. Now, I'm not going to talk about digital globalization. I'm not going to talk about climate. I want to focus on Moore's Law because it's the driver of everything. So my chapter on Moore's Law is called, What the Hell Happened in 2007? What the hell happened in 2007? I know what you're thinking. 2007, such an innocuous year. What's this guy talking about? Well, here's what happened in 2007. The year was kicked off at the Moscone Center in San Francisco when one Steve Jobs introduced this in January 2007, the first smartphone. That's how the year started. In 2007, a company called Facebook opened its platform to anyone with a registered email address. Before, it was actually late 2006, before then, only high schools and universities were on Facebook, and after 2007, they opened it up to all you old people. And when that happened, Facebook went global. In 2007, a company called Twitter split off on its own independent platform and went global. In 2007, the most important software you've never heard of, called Hadoop, named after the founder's son's toy elephant, launched into the wild. Hadoop is what enables 1 million computers to work together as if they're one. It's called big data. That happened in 2007. In 2007, the second most important software you've never heard of, called VMware, went public. VMware is what enables any operating system to work on any computer. It was the basis, it turns out, of cloud computing. In 2007, the third most important software you've never heard of, called GitHub, launched into the wild. GitHub is today the world's largest repository of source software. In 2007, a company called Google bought a little-known TV company called YouTube. And in 2007, this same company, Google, launched into the wild its own operating system called Android. In 2007, Jeff Bezos introduced the world's first e-book reader called the Kindle. And in 2007, IBM introduced the world's first cognitive computer called Watson. In 2007, 3 design students in San Francisco were attending the design conference that year, and they discovered all the hotel rooms were sold out. But one of them had 3 spare air mattresses, And they thought, why don't we rent these air mattresses out to people who can't find hotel rooms? And you know what happened? It worked out so well. In 2007, they started a company called Airbnb. Yeah, that's why it's called Airbnb, because of its founding air mattresses. And they kicked off the sharing economy. In 2007, late 2006 actually, the internet crossed 1 billion users. Seems to have been a tipping point. Here's what else happened in 2007. That's a graph of the cost of sequencing a human genome. You'll notice it's $100 million in 2001. It falls to $10 million for one genome in 2006. And then you'll notice it goes over a cliff like a waterfall in what year? 2007. This is a graph of solar energy. Solar energy took off in 2007, as did a process asked Pemex for extracting natural gas from tight shale called fracking. Between 2006 and 2008, America's total natural gas reserves increased by 35% in basically 1 year. That is a staggering number. This is a graph of social networks. So that white line, that's the cost of generating a megabit of data. You'll notice that it goes almost straight down in 2007. The blue line is the speed of transmitting that data. You'll notice the two lines cross in 2008. That's close enough, as we say, for government work. Oh, I forgot. The cloud. What year was the cloud born? Let's see, the first year we get statistics are 2008. The cloud was born in 2007. In 2007, for the first time, Intel went off silicon, introduced non-silicon materials into its microchips to extend Moore's Law. In 2005, Michael Dell, the founder of Dell Computers, retired. And in 2007, he decided he better come back to work. It turns out, friends, that 2007 may be understood in time as the single greatest technological inflection point since Gutenberg invented the printing press. And we all completely missed it. We all completely missed it. Why? Because of 2008. Yeah, right when our physical technologies just took off, like we were on a moving sidewalk at an airport that suddenly went from 5 to 50 miles an hour. Right when that happened, all of our social technologies, the regulatory reform, the political reform, the business management reform, the learning reform you needed to go with that, they all froze because we entered the deepest global recession since 1929. And in that dislocation between where technology was going and while people were adapting, Mr. Trump and Brexit and a whole bunch of people got born because so many people got dislocated. And you were here and you completely missed it. You know, someone was alive. I was telling President Fox this morning, someone was alive when Gutenberg invented the printing press. And I will bet that some monk said to some priest when he saw that printing press, now that is really cool. You mean I don't have to write these Bibles out longhand anymore? Well, you were here for a similar inflection point in 2007. What happened in 2007? I think what happened is your computer is made of 5 key components. It's got that Moore's Law microchip processor. It's got a storage chip. It's got networking. It's got software. And it's got a sensor. It's got a camera. And what I trace in the book is how all 5 have been in a Moore's Law, and they all melded together in 2007 into this thing we call the cloud. The cloud. But I never use the term the cloud in my book because it sounds so soft, so fluffy, so cuddly, so benign. Sounds like a Joni Mitchell song. I've looked at clouds from both sides. This ain't no cloud, folks. This is what I call in the book a supernova. The science students among you will know the supernova is the largest force in nature. It's the explosion of a star. And that's because what happened in 2007 was a release of energy into the hands of men, women, and machines, the likes of which we have never seen before. And it overnight, practically overnight, changed 4 kinds of power. It changed the power of one. Oh my goodness, what one person can do today as a maker or a breaker is like nothing we've seen before. We in America, we have a president who can sit in his pajamas in the West Wing of the White House and tweet directly to 1 billion people without an editor, a libel lawyer, or a filter. Some would say without even a brain, but he can do that. But here's what's really scary. The head of ISIS can do the exact same thing from Raqqa province in Syria. The power of one has really changed. The power of machines have changed. Machines are acquiring all 5 senses. We have never lived in a world where machines had all 5 senses. We passed that line on February 14th, 2011, on, of all places, a game show. The show had 3 contestants. 2 were the all-time Jeopardy champions. And the 3rd contestant simply went by his last name, Mr. Watson. Mr. Watson, of course, was an IBM cognitive computer. Mr. Watson passed on the first question, but he buzzed in before the 2 humans on the second question. See if you can get it. The question was, it's worn on the foot of a horse and used by a dealer in a casino. And in under 2.5 seconds, Mr. Watson, the computer, said in perfect Jeopardy style, "What is a shoe?" What is a shoe? And for the first time, we saw live on TV a cognitive computer figure out a pun faster than 2 human beings. It's changed the power of many. We are such a force of and on nature, we humans, that the new climate era is being named for us, the Anthropocene. The Anthropocene. And it changed the power of flows. Ideas now flow and circulate at a speed we've never seen before. And it's being in touch with the flow now that is key to your country's growth. Where did you want to build your city in the Middle Ages? You wanted to build it on a river, because that river's flow provided you nourishment, food, ideas, power, and transportation. You wanted to build your city on a river, on the Amazon. Where did you want to build your city today? On Amazon.com, because it provides you the flow of ideas, of nourishment that will drive your economy. These 4 changes of power, friends, they're not just changing your world. They are fundamentally reshaping your world. And they're reshaping these 5 realms: the workplace, politics, geopolitics, ethics, and community. Let me explain briefly how I think so. How are they changing the workplace? Well, my chapter on that subject is based on this simple graph. When I was working on this book, I went out to see Astro Teller, chief astronaut, CEO of Google X, Google's research arm. And as I got done explaining the thesis, Astro went over to his whiteboard and he drew this simple graph. So that blue line across the middle, that's the average rate at which human beings and societies adapt to change over time. You'll notice it has a positive slope, but it's very gradual. The white line is technology. So over here in the 11th and 12th century, that line was very flat. Your bow and arrow did not get better between the 11th and 12th century. There was no bow and arrow 2.0 in the 12th century. But then we got the scientific revolution, Copernicus, Galileo, then Steve Jobs and Bill Gates, and the line starts to go north. And then Astro drew that little diamond there. I said, "What's that, Astro?" He said, "That's where we are. We're at a place now where technology is moving faster than the average human being and society can adapt." Then Astro got one more magic marker out, and he drew that little dotted line there, up from the human adaptability line. I said, "What's that, Astro?" That's learning faster and governing smarter. That's why you're here today. That's the challenge of every society. How do we learn faster and govern smarter so more people can take advantage of where technology is and where it's going? That's why my chapter on the workplace is called "How do we turn AI into IA?" How do we take artificial intelligence and turn it into intelligent assistance so more people can live above the line? How do we turn it into intelligent assistance, ANTS? And how do we turn it into intelligent algorithms? How do we turn AI into IA so more people can learn faster and govern smarter? So I'll give you an example of each one. My example of intelligent assistance is the human resources department at AT&T. I spent a lot of time with AT&T on this book. The short story is the following. AT&T, you know, big global telecom company, 330,000 employees, living right next to the cloud, right next to the supernova, feeling its heat every day, competing with Verizon and all these other telecoms. Pretty good chance that whatever is happening in the human resources department at AT&T is coming to a neighborhood near you. So what's going on there? Well, in rough terms, what's going on there is Randall Stevenson, their CEO, begins the year now with a pretty radically transparent speech about where AT&T is going, what businesses they're going to be in, and what skills you, their employees, need to be a rising employee at AT&T. Then they put all of their managers, 110,000 people, on their own in-house LinkedIn system so they can see exactly what skill sets I have and how they match up with where the company's going. So they've got Mr. Vincente Fox there, Mr. Fox. Turns out Vincente there are 10 skills you need that year to be a rising employee at AT&T, and President Fox has 7 of them, but he's missing 3. Then they come to Vincente and they say, "Vincente, here's the deal. We have created nano degrees for all 10 skill sets you need to be a rising employee here at AT&T. You have 7. We will give you up to $8,000 a year to take the nano degree courses for the skill sets you're missing, under one condition. One condition. You have to take all these courses on your own time, at home, at night, and on weekends, not on company time." Now, if Vincente says, "You know what, Mr. AT&T, I've climbed up one too many telephone poles. I'm really not up for this anymore," AT&T now has a wonderful severance package for Vincente, but he won't be working there much longer. What is AT&T's social contract with their employees? Very simple. You can be a lifelong employee at AT&T, but only now if you are a lifelong learner. If you are not ready to be a lifelong employee, you can no longer be a lifelong learner. You can no longer be a lifelong employee. And that, my friends, is the social contract coming to a neighborhood near you. The days when you could go to college for 4 years or 2 years and then expect to dine out on that knowledge for the 30 years of your career, that is so over in an age of acceleration. Now things you learn in your first year in college will be outdated by the 4th year. When Google released its machine learning algorithm called TensorFlow, Udacity, the online learning platform, had a course up in TensorFlow programming in 30 days. How many universities you think had a program class for programming TensorFlow up in 30 days? I doubt very many. What is the point here? The point was put best by my friend Heather McGowan. She says, never ask a kid today what you want to be when you grow up. Never ask a kid what you want to be when you grow up, because whatever it is, it's going to be gone unless it's policeman or fireman. Only ask your kid today how you want to be when you grow up. Will you have a predisposition to lifelong learning? Will you have an agile learning mindset? As Heather says, learning today is so much more important than knowing, because what you know will be increasingly outdated faster. And that leads to a real challenge. One of the things that I think is really roiling your society and mine. And it's from something I learned from Marina Gorbis. You know, 10 years ago, everyone talked about the digital divide. America's got internet, Mexico doesn't. Mexico City's got internet, Leon doesn't. America's got it, and Mexico's got it, and Africa doesn't. We're all worried about the digital divide. Well, forget about the digital divide. If it's not gone, it's going to be gone in 5 years. And when it is, the most important divide in the world, says Marina, is going to be the self-motivation divide. Who has the self-motivation to take advantage of all these opportunities on the internet to be a lifelong learner? Long after you've left home and mom and dad aren't there to say, honey, have you done your homework? This is a real challenge because so many workers in Mexico and America were basically born and bred to do what they were told. And by the way, they did it well. They built your country and they built my country. Unfortunately, doing what you're told does not cut it anymore. You have got to be a lifelong learner. You've got to be self-motivated. And that challenge is roiling your society and mine. So that's intelligent assistance. What is my example of intelligent assistant? ANT. So I spent a lot of time with a company called Qualcomm. Qualcomm made the inside of your iPhone. They actually made the chips and a lot of the software, not Apple. That's why Apple is always suing Qualcomm over patents. So they have a 64-building campus out in San Diego. And 2 years ago, they took 6 buildings, 3 years ago, 6 buildings, and they put sensors everywhere. Every door, window, light, faucet, pipe, drain, heating, cooling, computer. So if I'm at my desk and I leave my computer on, and then they took all that data, from the sensors, and they beamed it up to the cloud, up to the supernova, and then they beamed it back down onto an iPad with an incredibly friendly user interface for their janitors. So if I leave my computer on or a pipe bursts above my head, the janitors see it on their iPad before I do. And they just swipe down on how to fix it or who to call to repair it. Qualcomm turned their janitors into maintenance technologists. What do you think their janitors do? They now give tours to foreign visitors. And what do you think that does for the dignity of a janitor? Because he or she now has an intelligent assistant enabling them to live at a higher pace of change. Last example, intelligent algorithm. So in America, you all may know, in 11th grade, we have to take the PSAT, college entrance preparatory exam, in order to get ready for the SAT, college entrance exam, to see if we can get into Harvard or whatever university we want. What a lot of American parents do who can afford it is in 11th grade, they go out and hire tutors in order to improve their kids' scores in math and in reading. A completely rigged game. A completely rigged game, because if you come from a family or neighborhood that can't afford a $200 an hour tutor to improve your kids' SAT scores, you're at a real disadvantage. So 3 years ago, the SAT people, the College Board, And Khan Academy, the online learning platform, created a free online platform for SAT prep. The way it works is in 11th grade, I take the PSAT exam. I get the results back, and they say, Tom, you did really good in verbal. You could be a journalist, in fact. But you have a problem with math. In fact, it tells me I have a specific problem with fractions and right angles. This website then takes me to a practice site just for fractions and right angles. Exactly my personal weakness. If I do well there, it takes me to another site that says I could be an AP Math with a little prep. I could be an AP Math. Yeah, you could be an AP Math. I never heard of AP Math. I could be an AP Math. And then to another site that offers 180 college scholarships. Last year, 3 million American kids got free PSAT and SAT prep off this intelligent algorithm, enabling them to learn faster. Last example, it's called Opportunity at Work. So we have about 32 million Americans who started college but never finished. Some went 1 year, 2 years, 2.5, 3 years, dropped out. They go to apply for a job. The employer says, where's your BA? No BA, no job, sorry. A total waste of human talent. So these websites have emerged, these intelligent algorithms like Opportunity at Work, where you can now go and be tested. And they will show just what you learned in your 1 year, 2, 3 years. And they will partner with companies who will slot you in without a BA based on what you know. So I profiled in the book a young African-American woman, Lashana Lewis. She had gone to Michigan Tech, studied computer science for 3.5 years, had to drop out for family reasons, went to apply for a job, no BA, no job. She ended up driving a bus to and from a computer school, couldn't make that up, and working on the help desk at a law firm, helping lawyers find their lost passwords. She got in touch with one of these websites like Opportunity at Work. They slotted her in as a systems engineer at MasterCard. They saw how much she knew. Today she's a senior systems engineer at MasterCard, and as she says at the end of her interview in my book, and I still don't have my BA. That is an intelligent algorithm that has recouped enormous human talent. And we're going to have to do a lot of that because you can't see these lines very far from back there, but you can see the colors. And that white line is called jobs we do with our hands. And that blue line, that's called jobs we do with our minds. You can see where those graphs are going. So that's the workplace. Let me talk briefly about geopolitics. How is geopolitics being changed by the age of acceleration? The most important changes are threefold. One is because human power is being amplified, we're seeing the rise of super empowered angry men and women. Yeah, we don't just have superpowers now. We have super empowered angry men and women. I just came from Iraq a few weeks ago. ISIS has been buying drones on Amazon.com and GoPro cameras, fixing them together and creating a little claw to drop hand grenades on our troops. Bad guys are early adopters, and this technology is super empowering them. That's the first big change. Second big change is when the world gets this technologically sewn together. The world is no longer interconnected. It's no longer hyper-connected. It's becoming interdependent. And when the world gets this interdependent, you get a geopolitical inversion. You get a geopolitical inversion. First of all, your friends can kill you faster than your enemies. In an interdependent world, if Mexico's economy tanks, we in America will really suffer, and vice versa. If Greece and Italy's banks go under, oh my God, we will be affected all over America. Greece and Italy, Mexico, they're allies. But in an interdependent world, your friends can kill you faster than your enemies. And in an interdependent world, your rivals falling is more dangerous than your rivals rising. If China takes 6 more islands in the South China Sea, personally, I couldn't care less. If China loses 6% growth, this conference isn't going to be held next year. Your rivals falling is now more dangerous than your rivals rising. And the last effect is the rise of what I call weakism. Weakism. That is the most dangerous ideology, the most dangerous ism in the world today. You see, the 50 years after World War II were a great time to be a weak little state. Oh, it was a wonderful time to be a weak state. The 50 years after World War II. Why? Because there were 2 superpowers out there throwing money at you, scholarships, foreign aid, buying your stuff, building your stadium, rebuilding your army. Syria could lose 3 wars to Israel, and the Russians rebuilt them all 3 times. The 50 years after World War II were a great time to be a weak state. Globalization was moderate. Everyone had a demographic dividend, lots of young people, few old people. Climate change was moderate, and China was an isolated economy that was not in the World Trade Organization. In the age of acceleration, every one of those advantages has been wiped out. Now no superpower wants to touch you because all they win is a bill. More and more countries have a demographic deficit, lots of old people, few young people. Climate change is now hammering countries. And China is in the World Trade Organization, so no one else can be in the textile business. And what this is doing is eroding weak states, and some of them are now collapsing before our eyes. You see it in Central America, around Honduras, El Salvador, and Guatemala. We see it across West Africa, through the Middle East, all the way to the border of India. And what they're creating is a vast zone of disorder. And that's why the biggest geopolitical divide in the world today is no longer north, south, east, west, communist, capitalist. It's between the world of order and the world of disorder. And Mexico is right in the middle of this transition zone. And basically tens of millions of people are trying to get out of the world of disorder now into the world of order. And how we collectively work to stabilize the world of disorder is the big geopolitical challenge today. Let me finish by talking about 2 other realms that are being reshaped. Ethics, this is really important. Ethics and community. Ethics. How could ethics be in my talk? Very simply. My chapter on ethics is called, Is God in Cyberspace? Is God in cyberspace? Best question I ever got on book tour. 1999, I'm in Portland, Oregon. I'm selling a book called Lexus and the Olive Tree. A man stands up at question time in the balcony and says, Mr. Friedman, I have a question. Is God in cyberspace? I said, I have no idea. And I felt like an idiot. So I got home and I called my spiritual teacher. He's a rabbi who I got to know when I was the New York Times correspondent in Jerusalem, named Zvi Marx, a great Talmudic scholar. He lives in Amsterdam now, married to a Dutch priest, a very interesting character. I called him up in Amsterdam. I said, Zvi, I got a question I've never had before. Is God in cyberspace? What should I have said? He said, Tom, very simple. In our faith tradition, we have two concepts of the Almighty, a biblical concept and a post-biblical concept. The biblical concept says the Almighty is almighty. He destroys evil and he rewards good. But if that's your view of God, he sure isn't in cyberspace, which is full of pornography, gambling, cheating, lying, crime, slander, and now we know fake news. But he said, fortunately, we have a post-biblical view of God that says God manifests himself by how we behave. So if we want God to be in cyberspace, we have to bring him there by how we behave there. Well, I wrote all that up in the paperback edition of Lexus and the Olive Tree. It came out in the year 2000, where none of you saw it. and it sat there for basically almost 20 years. I started writing this book, and I found myself suddenly retelling that story. And I eventually sat myself down and said, why are you retelling that story? And the answer became quickly apparent for two reasons, and one just happened. Because in 2016, we hit a tipping point. In 2016, we started living 51% of our lives in cyberspace. Oh, you could see it the way retail went over a cliff. We could see it at the New York Times in 2016. Ads went over a cliff. A whole bunch of things went over a cliff in 2016 because you all started living more than half your life in cyberspace. That's where you went to find a date, find a spouse, buy a car, buy a book, sell your home, get your news. We are now living our lives more and more in cyberspace. And what is my definition of cyberspace? It's a realm where we're all connected, but no one's in charge. It's a realm where we're all connected, but no one's in charge. There are no stoplights in cyberspace. No courts, no police, no 1-800, please stop Putin from hacking my election. But that's where we're living more than half of our lives. And at the same time, what's happened is because of these accelerations, we as a species are now standing at a moral intersection we have never stood at before. For the first time in 1945, we entered a world where one country, post-Hiroshima, could kill all of us. I think today we're entering a world where one person can kill all of us because of these amplified powers, and where all of us could actually fix everything. We've never been at this intersection before, where one of us could kill all of us, and all of us with these same powers could actually feed, house, clothe, and educate every person on the planet. We have never been here before, where one of us could kill all of us and all of us could fix everything. And what does that mean? It means we have never been more godlike as a species than we are today. Well, put the two together. If we are living our lives in a realm that's God-free, and we are increasingly godlike, what does that mean? It means everyone better be in the grip of sustainable values. At a minimum, the golden rule, and every faith has their version. Do unto others as you wish them to do unto you, because we now live in a world where more people can do unto you from farther away, and you can do unto others farther away, faster, deeper, cheaper than ever before. Everyone needs to be in the embrace of the golden rule. And that's why my book is called Thank You for Being Late, because the subtext is, in this age of acceleration, the things that matter most are all the things you can't download. What really matters most now are all the things you have to upload the old-fashioned way. Good parenting to good child, good teacher to good student, good leader to good citizen, good preacher to good flock. These old-time values matter more than ever. The golden rule. Oh, I know what you're thinking. See, I gave this as the commencement address at Olin College of Engineering a year and a half ago. And I told the parents there, I know what you're thinking. You paid $200,000 for your kid to get an engineering degree. And who do they bring in as the commencement speaker? Someone advocating the golden rule. Is there anything more naive? And I told them what I'll tell you. Naivete in this age of acceleration is the new realism. Because I'll tell you what's really naive. Thinking we're going to be okay in this age of acceleration if everyone is not in the grip of values and the minimum, the golden rule. Where do values come from? Two places: strong families and healthy communities. I'm not an expert on strong families. I built one, but I would never lecture anyone on that. But I am an expert on healthy communities because I grew up in one, a small town in Minnesota called St. Louis Park. And that's why my book ends in this community, this place that anchored me, that gave me values. It was my anchor and it was my sail. Because it anchored me, It gave me the confidence to go out in the world because I always knew there was a place called home. The conclusion of my book is that in this age of acceleration, national governments are just too slow and divided. Yours is, mine is. They can't do anything. The single family is too weak against these forces of acceleration. The proper governing unit in the 21st century is going to be the healthy community. That is where we need to push more and more governments down to, because government moves at the speed of trust, and trust is highest at the community level. My teacher, Dov Seidman, likes to say, trust is the only legal performance-enhancing drug. Where there's trust in the room, you can go so fast. And where there's no trust in the room, you can't go 2 feet. And we need to move government down there. And the reason America is doing well today is, in my view, driven so much by communities that are creating what I call complex adaptive organisms, where the business community is partnering with the public school system, is partnering with the philanthropic and civic community to create adaptive units so their people can thrive in the age of acceleration. That's why I tell people, if you want to be an optimist about America today, stand on your head. My country looks so much better from the bottom up than from the top down. And that's because so many people at the local level are doing what my teacher, Amory Lovins, calls. Amory, whenever you ask him, Amory, are you an optimist or a pessimist? He says, I'm neither, because they're just two different forms of fatalism. Everything will be great. Everything will be awful. Amory says, I believe in applied hope. I believe in applied hope. I believe in applied hope. And the communities that are applying hope in America, and there's so many more than you realize. I feel I'm in one here in Mexico. They're going to thrive in the age of accelerations. So let me conclude with my book's theme song. My book has a theme song. I actually explored if I could buy it, so when you opened the book, it would play this song like a Hallmark card plays Happy Birthday. The song is by my favorite singer, Brandi Carlile. She's a country folk singer, and her song is called The I, E-Y-E, The I. And the main refrain of the song is, I wrapped your love around me like a chain, but I never was afraid that it would die. You can dance in a hurricane, but only if you're standing in the eye. You can dance in a hurricane, but only if you're standing in the eye. My 3 accelerations, friends, they're a hurricane. We have politicians, and you have politicians, who are trying to build a wall to the hurricane. I am trying to build an eye that moves with the storm, draws energy from it, but creates a platform of dynamic stability, the healthy community, where people can feel connected, protected, and respected. The great political struggle in Mexico and America and in London and in Europe now is between the wall people and the I people. And my book is a manifesto for the I people. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Sorry.
May I ask you some questions? Hola, hola, aquí está. May I ask you some questions? Thank you very much. It was really an eye-opening what you have said until here. I have 3 questions, and I ask if you can answer them the shorter you can. One is, what is the possibility of change when the historical root is so big or important as in Mexico?
You turn my mic on, thank you. So to repeat the question, I think is what are the prospects of change in a society where the historical roots are so deep?
Strong. Yeah.
So I think your historical roots can be a real advantage, because I think when people feel anchored, when they feel anchored in a culture and a history and a community, they can dare to go far. It's all about getting things in balance. If your historical roots swamp, the ability to move forward, those roots can choke your ability to go forward, you can't move. If you go forward and you simply run over your historical roots, you will get a backlash. So the question is always, how do you balance the local with the global? How do you get your globalism right? But having historical roots and people being anchored in a culture, I think that is, on balance, actually a good thing. There are too many people today who feel uprooted, unmoored, and unanchored.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Second question. You wrote an article about Mexico 6 years ago, titled "The NAFTAs, the Nos, and the Narcos." Do you remember that?
I sure do.
Okay. You said that the future of Mexico was hinged on who of these three groups would win. So 6 years after that, who's winning?
Yeah. Very good question. Next question, please. Someone back there. No, you have to tell me, Elena. I think that the good news and the bad news is the struggle is still alive and well here between those two trends, and or those three trends. And I can't come to an event like this. I can't fly into León Airport and see all those factories around there in central Mexico without thinking something really good is happening here, that someone's got their thinking hat on. But I can't also read stories about Acapulco becoming such a crime haven no tourist wants to go there without being deeply worried. And so it's really, you're in a struggle. You're in a struggle internally between your forces of order and disorder. And the forces of order simply have to win. They have to win for Mexico, and they have to win for the good of all your neighbors. So I'm rooting for you, but the battle clearly is not over, but it is joined at least.
Okay, thank you. And the last one. When you showed the graphics about the relationship between the groups of using hands and the other ones using minds, don't you see that that is inconsistent with the actual politics of Trump trying to recover employees that were in other countries like Mexico?
Yeah. Well, it comes as no surprise to your audience that I think Trump is wrong. I think he's foolish, and I think he's trying to push America in the wrong direction. The good news, though, is there's a lot of pushback. And just to take that graph for a second, I did a column a few months ago with my friend Dov Seidman, and we made the point that, for many years we all worked with our hands.
Yeah.
And then for many years we worked with our heads. We think in the future we're going to work a lot more with our hearts. I think work is going from hands to heads to hearts, okay? And that really was Dov's argument. So what do I mean? One of my favorite interviews in this book is with our Surgeon General, our former Surgeon General, a wonderful man, Trump fired him, named Dr. Vivek Murthy. And I interviewed Dr. Murthy, our Surgeon General, our top doctor, and I said, Vivek, what is the biggest disease in America today? Is it cancer, diabetes, or heart disease? And he said, Tom, it's none of those. It's isolation. Isolation. I thought, wow, that's amazing. We live in the most connected era in history, and the Surgeon General of the United States, our top doctor, is telling me the biggest disease he's worried about is people feeling isolated and depressed. And that's true. And that tells me there's a huge business going to come forward in connecting hearts to hearts. So I'm less worried. I read all these studies that by 2050, 47.3% of current jobs will be gone. 47.3, not 47.2, not 47.4, but 47.3. Who knows what jobs are going to be gone in 2050? How about a little humility? And how about a little betting on human beings? You know what was the fastest growing restaurant chain in America in 2015? You'll never guess. It's called Paint Night. Paint Night. You know what Paint Night is? It's restaurants that offer paint by numbers for adults in bars. So artists go out, they draw a design, and adults come in after work and they paint together by numbers and have a drink together. It's all about connection, community, heart to heart. Fastest growing restaurant chain in America in 2015. So no, a lot of jobs are going to disappear, but a lot of jobs are going to come. Just keep yourself open. The worst thing you can do, I'm telling my own country, when the world gets fast, is to close up. Because when the world is fast, what do you want most? You want to get the signals of change first. And you want to attract the most entrepreneurial, high IQ risk takers. The last thing you want to do when the world is fast is close up. So please, anything, please don't close up. And remember, in 3.5 years, hopefully, Trump will be gone. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.